Here we are, just in an effort to alert everyone, in case it comes up, next few witnesses, not the next few witnesses, but a witness after Mr. Jenkins, the state may be in a position to argue 613 and 80326. State's ready.
Defense ready for the jury? We are. Bring in the jury.
Okay. 26. 26. 803 and 26.
803. You can be seated. Stand with the call? Yes, sir. Stand with the call? Yes, Your Honor. Your name is Mr.
Oh, Xavier Jenkins.
This side, Your Honor?
Yes, sir. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat.
Please give us your name, sir.
Xavier Jenkins,
You spell your first name, please.
Xavier.
Mr. Jenkins, where are you from?
Well, I'm from Shelby, North Carolina, but I've been here my whole life, Knoxville, Tennessee.
Sir, directing your attention back to January 2007, were you working here in Knox County?
I was.
Where were you working at?
Waste Connections.
And if you want to, you can pull that microphone down a little bit closer. What did you do for Waste Connections?
I was a driver.
Now, was there a new position that you were training for?
It was.
Can you tell us about that, please?
Okay, so I was a residential driver and basically approached by a couple of guys for a commercial driving position, front-end loader. I don't know if you all know the containers or whatnot for commercial businesses. So I was training for that position.
Now, was there any type of what training did you have to go through in order to train for that position?
Just a little practice over the weekends, in your spare time after work, and of course being with an actual trainer, going out and running a couple of routes with a trainer.
And what time were those routes?
Usually 12:30 to about 7, depending on when the trainer got there.
And where Waste Connections, where is it located?
Chipman Street. It's actually, I believe, on Mitchell, or I think the address for them is Chipman, though, if I'm not mistaken.
Sir, if I can direct your attention to January 6th, going into January 7th, 2007, to show you a calendar. We'll let you know what I'm talking about here. Talking about late night Saturday, early morning hours on the 7th, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Do you recall that morning?
I do.
And you could tell the court where you were at and what you were doing that morning.
Again, I applied for the new position, so I was in training, and I was instructed by my supervisor to be there at 12:30, and that one of the lead drivers would train me. So I was parked there behind the building, waiting for the trainer to get there.
And when you say you're parked behind the building, what street were you parked on?
I believe it's Chipman, but I can probably show you better than I can tell you.
Please, if I can direct your attention, for the record, I need to call this number out. To 427, you recognize Exhibit 427?
Yes,
And what do you recognize Exhibit 427 to be?
the area of the business in the house.
If you could, using that red marker, can you mark an X as to where you were parked?
Sure.
If it's okay for you to step down, Your Honor?
Yes, sir.
And your vehicle, what type of vehicle was it that you were driving?
Dodge Dynasty, I believe back then, a maroon.
And in what direction was it pointing?
I was parked here and this way here, facing Waste Connections.
And if you could, on that map there, 427, can you point to where Waste Connections is?
Yeah, right here.
And where is Chipman Street?
Chipman is the street that runs along the backside.
Okay. You want to take your seat again? Approximately what time do you think you got there?
Well, being the new guy on the totem pole, I'd say probably about 12:30. It may have been 12:35-ish, possibly, but it was definitely on time somewhat.
What, if anything, did you notice?
When I got there, initially, just at the house, because it's usually dark in that area, the house was kind of busy. Porch light on, a few vehicles parked out front, parking lights, things of that sort on, the 4Runner that was involved.
Now, had you been to that location before at that time?
Yeah.
And had you noticed this before?
No.
Now, you say the porch light was on.
Yes.
For what house?
I guess it would be considered Chipman Street house. I don't know the address.
And you said something about a 4Runner.
Correct.
Where was the 4Runner located?
Directly in front of the house.
And what did you notice about the 4Runner?
Just the headlights or parking lights seem to be on. It just, like I said, the area seemed busy. It seemed like there was a lot of traffic, in and out.
Did you notice any other vehicles?
I did.
What vehicle did you notice?
There was a white vehicle behind it. And there was maybe one or two vehicles behind that, but I believe those to be the neighbors' vehicles because they were, more than like a car space further back.
If I could direct your attention to Exhibit 5, do you recognize Exhibit 5?
I do.
What do you recognize Exhibit 5 to be?
That's the 4Runner, Toyota 4Runner.
Come back to 6. Do you
That-
recognize Exhibit 14?
I do.
And what is Exhibit 14?
That's the car parked directly behind the 4Runner.
Now, if you could, sir, on that map, Exhibit 427, can you write 4Runner where you saw the 4Runner and WC for the white car in the location of the white car?
So the 4Runner right here, which I'm having right there, but it's actually in between the business here
Okay.
and then the white car. What did you say right for that?
WC, please.
Park right behind.
And which direction were they pointing?
Facing me, going toward the business.
Okay. Upon noticing this, what happened after that?
I was sitting there, and of course, I guess 30, 45 minutes maybe had went by, so started wondering, where's my trainer? So I went around to the store. Well, there's a phone actually at the Weigel's there, payphone. I went to call him and see what was going on with him. And after I got off the phone with him, went directly across the street to get M&Ms and soda.
After you got your M&Ms and soda, where did you then go?
Back to the parking lot to wait on him.
What did you know? And when you get back to the parking lot, where are you parked at?
Yeah, same spot.
And how's your car positioned?
Same way, facing the business.
Tell us what you noticed.
As I'm sitting there, the 4Runner with the lights on, then drives off. and they drive in my direction, which, you know, there's nothing odd about that. But they drove in my direction, and as they got right there in the bend, they slowed down, kind of, you know, checked me out and whatnot, see if I could see them or see, you know, who I was, I guess. They then went all the way around to the front of the building, and at that time, I'm already kind of on alert because they slowed down to look at me. You know, it's dark back there. There's not a whole lot of lighting, but there's lighting toward the business. So, you know, parked in that area, there's a lot of grassiness and overgrown weeds and things that sort directly behind you, so it kind of puts you on edge. But they went to the stop sign, hung a right, and went in front of the building, which struck me as kind of odd because, again, if they were going to, I guess, go, I don't know which direction that would be, go away from the business, they could have easily just did a U-turn. In front of the house, they could have done a U-turn right in front of me. I mean, if they had nothing to, you know, worry about, they would have done a U-turn right in front of me, just kind of threw up a hand, waved at me, and went on.
Speculating as to what was in the minds of the people in the vehicle.
Sustains to the speculation.
Did this strike you as odd?
It did. So much so that I called my father and told him, hey, some guys just looked at me. And he said, just watch, watch your A. You know, because he knew where I was.
Now, were you able to determine any of the people in the vehicle?
I couldn't see any faces, so I couldn't tell you who was in the vehicle, but I could definitely tell how many. It was 4 people in the vehicle. The driver, to me, seemed to be the tallest. He had on a bomber coat with a fur collar, if you will, almost like your bubble jacket, I guess, kind of deal. Because you could see in that silhouette, I could see the fur around the collar. And the passenger, the far back passenger on the right side, he was slumped down in the seat like he was trying to hide. I don't know why that is, but yeah.
So how many people total did you see in the vehicle?
Total of 4.
Did you tell what sex they were?
To me, they were all men, and from their demeanor, I thought they were black men. Just because of the behavior, the way they were driving. You know, I grew up in East Knoxville, so you know we don't drive straight up holding the steering wheel with 2 hands. You know, we're going to lean and look out the window, whatever, and that's what, you know, the driver was doing.
So going back to Exhibit 427, can you draw first the path that the forerunner took with the red mark?
Pulled out from here, with this direction here, slowed here in the corner, went around, went this way here, came to the front of the building, on the right, went this direction here.
And if you could, still using that red marker, can you write slow where they slowed down?
Right here in the beginning.
And can you write 4 BM where you were able to believe there to be 4 black males?
Right here.
Right, so you call your dad?
Yeah.
What happens after that?
Let's see here. Basically, called him. He said, of course, watch back. And I guess 30 minutes maybe, Leroy pulls in, who was my trainer. He pulls in, opens the gate, lets both me and him in. We park our vehicles inside so that, you know, people can't mess with your cars and things of that sort while you're at work. We pull in, park our vehicles, go upstairs, wait for my other boss, operations manager, wait for his son to show up because he was training with us. And then we all clock in and go to work.
Run your route?
Yeah.
After you run your route, what happens?
Come back, I guess 6:30ish, 6:40ish, somewhere in there. And as we're pulling in, I noticed the 4Runner. And it's parked where I was parked, but further a little bit back toward the railroad tracks and facing the railroad track. So I told Leroy, I said, hey man, I said, something odd about that. I said, I believe it's a stolen vehicle. He said, nah man, it's probably some teenagers, something back here. They be back here all the time making out, blah, blah, blah. So Leroy decided, he said, hold on. He put on the bright lights. And I don't know if you all have seen some of these trash trucks, but they're flat nosed. It's what we call a cab over. So we were able to pull like inches away from the glass, thinking that would shine somewhat through the glass because it had tinted windows. But when you're that close and with that tint, it actually reflected the light of the headlights back at you, so we couldn't tell. So we backed up. He said, no, there's nobody in there. But I said, well, hold on, pull to the back of it. So he backs up, he pulls to the rear of it. And I wanted to make sure, see if it was out of place. I mean, we're in Knox, so if it had, a strange tag or Knox, or say like a Granger County or Hamilton County, something different, then I know it's out of place. But it had a Knox County tag, and he said, man, it's just probably nothing, And we basically blew it off and pulled in and clocked out and went home.
Direct your attention to Exhibit 6. Do you recognize Exhibit 6?
I do.
What do you recognize Exhibit 6 to be?
The 4Runner.
Now, does this look the same as it looked that night or that morning?
No, ma'am.
What's the difference?
It looks like it's missing the T that was in the position in the window.
For the record, we would like to move to evidence Exhibit 14.
Any objection?
No objection.
Let it be received.
Now, sir, in preparation for testimony, did you meet with the federal authorities and did they show you a photo lineup involving the white vehicle?
They did.
If I can approach and show you Exhibit 418. Yes, collective 418. And don't tell us what anyone said, but can you tell us the circumstances, maybe where you were at when you were shown? You recognize Exhibit 418?
Yeah.
And what do you recognize Exhibit 418 to be?
The car lineup.
And do you recall where you were at whenever you were shown this car lineup?
Yes, ma'am. I was on my route.
And
My trash route.
your trash route?
Yeah.
And so showing you Exhibit 418, what were you asked to do on Collective 418?
He basically contacted my supervisor, found out where I was, met with me. We pulled off to the side of the road, and he basically asked me if there were any other cars there, and I said, yeah, there were. He said, is there anything that you could, possibly remember about those cars? Maybe like color, how old they were, blah, blah, blah. And as he said that, I said, well, yeah, it was white. And I said probably about late 90s or early 90s, I'm sorry, late 80s. And he said, well, is there anything else you can remember? I said, well, yes, it had a red pinstripe. And he said, if I showed you a lineup of these cars, could you possibly identify? I said, it's possible, He said, well, hold on. And he laid them out on the car. I remember he had 3 on top, 3 on the bottom, on the hood of the car. And he did them really kind of one by one. So he went 1. I said, no, it doesn't jog anything. He went 2, 3, 4, 5. And when he got to the one with the pinstripe, I said, yeah, that one there. He said, are you sure? I said, yes, sir. He said, would you be willing to sign the back of these? And as I signed, he said, okay, on this one, the ones that you said weren't the car, could you please, initial and put the word no? And I did. And then he said, on the one that you said is the car, could you put yes? And I did that.
And so what are we looking at in Collective Exhibit 418?
Just looks like the car lineup pictures. The 6.
On the first page, are your initials on the back of it? And on the first page, tell us about your initials. What's underneath your initials?
It has the date 10/2/07, 3:25 p.m. in my writing, and the word no.
All right, so about the second page.
My initials, 10/2/07, 10/07, 3:25 p.m., yes, my writing.
In that second page, why did you write yes on the second page?
That was the one that I identified that was behind the forerunner.
All right, what about the third page?
My initials, 10/07, 3:25 p.m., no, in my handwriting. Again, 3:25 p.m., no, in my handwriting.
That's the fourth page.
Yes, ma'am. Fifth page, 10/2/07, 3:25 p.m., no, in my handwriting. 10/2/07, 3:25 p.m., no, in my handwriting. On the sixth page.
That could be a collective exhibit, and this is the one here that you wrote yes on?
Yes,
And that's the same car as that pictured up there.
yes.
We would like to move into evidence exhibit 418 and publish it to the jury.
Any objection? No, Your Honor. Let it be received and published.
I forgot about oh, we're on that. Tell us about mean mugging.
Yeah, I was sitting there, and when they slowed, when I was first initially asked about, what happened, that was the word that I used to describe how they looked at me. They came through, and I basically told them, yeah, they mean mugged me. And I kind of mean mugged them back, to say, they were looking at me as if like, why are you here? And I gave them a look like, why are you here? I work here. I guess it was just a male thing, I don't know, when, it's hard to explain. If anybody's been in that situation when when men are looking at each other, it's kind of like, you don't back down, and that's what I felt was going on.
Ask the witness if they are looking at that exhibit.
Afternoon, Mr. Jenkins.
Hello.
Now, the vehicle that you saw, let's first talk about the Forerunner. It had tinted windows, correct?
Forerunner, yes.
Okay. And what first, I think you've described it pretty well, but I think this is what, the 8th time you've testified in some proceeding?
It's been some years, I'm not sure. Yeah, this is the 12th year.
Multiple times that you've had to testify, been under cross-examination by various attorneys.
Correct.
In these proceedings. This area, obviously, you have the garbage company that's right there, and there's where they park the garbage trucks, correct?
Correct.
And you said when you're on shift, you park the car in that facility, within the gates of the facility.
Yes.
Because you don't want anybody to come mess with your car, break
Correct.
into it, or anything like that. The area where you parked and where you put the X on, that area is undeveloped. It's basically a vacant lot, correct?
It's not vacant. It used to actually be the parking lot for our scales.
Okay.
I don't know what they used them for, but they're kind of like a abandoned scale, truck scale. I don't know if you all are familiar with that. The guys maybe, but it's a truck scale back there, and we've no longer used it. So grass and weed and things
Grass
like
and
that.
reeds, it's grown up, there's no houses or anything like that.
No.
And so, and that area is obviously dark at nighttime, at this time of day.
Correct.
So that area is dark. I think you've testified that generally speaking on Chipman Street, because you've got these residences that are right there, that area is usually dark as well, correct? And that what first attracted you to Chipman Street to the house was the fact that they had the porch light on, and then they had a car, and I think that it had its running lights on, the car?
Yeah, running lights. Yeah.
Running lights on, but not the headlights.
That I can remember, yes.
Okay. And I know you've said that the Waste Connections is really well illuminated, correct?
Yes.
All right. But further on down the street, I mean, there are some street lights, but there are areas that are, it's fairly dark back there.
I would say, yeah.
Yeah. And I believe you've also previously testified that it's about 300 feet between where your car was parked and where the white car that you saw. About a football length.
If I had to guess, I would say probably maybe this courtroom and a half or more, slightly.
Do you recall having testified to it being 300 feet previously?
I'm not sure.
Would it help to refresh your recollection if I showed you the previous testimony?
If it's there, that's fine.
So you're not contesting that you didn't say that it was 300 feet?
No. All I'm saying is I was parked in the gravel parking lot,
Sure.
catty corner, and I
Gotcha.
could see the house.
Mm-hmm.
The house was busy. The house had a light on. The 4Runner had a light on in front of it. There was a white vehicle with a red pinstripe parked directly behind it. There was other cars parked behind that.
Yes, I understand. This is at 12:30 to 1:30 at night, correct?
Correct.
You were there for about an hour, at least.
Give or take.
Yeah, I think we actually have where you clocked in. It was closer to 2 o'clock, if I remember correctly. So, and you were sitting there, and at least some of that time you had left to, I think you made a phone call to your supervisor, correct?
Lead driver, Leroy.
And so you went to the Weigels, which at that time of day is closed, right?
Correct.
And then you went and bought your candy bar and your soda over at the Marathon across the street. All right. So you're sitting there, and you said this 4Runner comes driving by you and slows down. And what you saw were the silhouettes of heads in the vehicle, correct?
Correct.
Through the tinted windows.
Correct.
So you weren't, and you've never testified that you were actually able to make out the features as far as the
No.
facial features of any of the people
No.
in the vehicle. Do you remember anything in particular about any hairstyles or anything like
No.
that?
No, I couldn't. I would say that they probably didn't have long hair, because I probably would have saw that, considering I could actually see the fur on the bomber jacket. So if they had, say, like, this lady here, hair, I would probably be able to see that.
You would probably be able to see, but you don't recall.
No,
You
sir.
don't recall. So when you're saying that this was 4 men, this is based on your perception of the silhouettes in the car. And the attitude, the general attitude of the silhouettes.
Attitude and posture, more so
Slowing the car
posture.
down.
Yeah, well, not the slumping down.
No, I said slowing the car down as they're passing you.
Yeah.
And again, you can't make out any of the features of the people.
No.
What prompted you to actually contact, you said something to your supervisor, correct, about having seen the 4Runner, right?
Well, what happened as the days go on, every morning for a regular shift, we meet up in the break room, if you will, and we've got TVs. So they started flashing pictures of the 4Runner, trying to get information. And when they flashed it, I looked at Leroy and I said, dude, that's the truck. And I said it in front of the entire, people that were working that morning. They were like, what is he talking about? I was like, Leroy, that's the truck. And he was like, nah, man. I was like, no, dude, that's the truck, the one that we pulled up on. That's it. And I think from that, when things started getting heated up, ATF agents, things of that sort started showing up, the word had been, okay, you might want to talk to one of our guys, because he's seen something, and he's told people in the break room that he thought that was the truck. So they interviewed me.
Yeah, so you didn't contact law enforcement. Well, what it was actually the media coverage of this case that got you to say, hey, hold on, I've seen that 4Runner.
Correct.
Okay, and then based on that, about a week later, a detective came out and talked to you about the 4Runner.
I'm not even sure if it was a week later. It could have been within the next day or two, because they were moving, pretty fast, I'm sure, trying to get that, information.
But it was a couple of days later that they
Probably.
came out and they talked to you
Yeah.
about the specifics, about seeing the 4Runner.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, you didn't say anything to him about seeing a white car.
No. I did tell him there were other cars, but he didn't ask about the other cars.
But again, my question was, you didn't tell him about a white car being there, correct?
No, but I did tell him about other cars. I specifically told him about what I saw, just like I told you all. There
And it
was
was-
a 4Runner, other cars parked behind, and he focused in on the 4Runner. He said, okay, tell me more about the 4Runner.
And it was actually when preparations were being made for Mr. Boyd's trial in federal court, that you were contacted by the attorneys preparing for the case, correct?
Correct.
And that's when they started asking you, did you see any other cars?
He specifically, he said, okay, you mentioned you saw some other cars. Do you remember anything specific about those cars? He didn't say, hey, you know, did you see this other car or something? He didn't lead me in any kind of way. He just asked, hey, you stated earlier that you saw other cars. Is there anything specific you can remember? Like maybe the model, color, make?
And you remember when all this happened back in 2007, in January 2007?
Yeah.
It is a big deal, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah.
A lot of media coverage, a lot of stuff going on.
I tried not to, even to this day. I absolutely, with all due respect to the family, I absolutely have hated this experience. It's not something I want to remember. To collect my own sanity, I've had to take 3 blood pressure pills instead of 1. I go home and hug my kids. As a result, it's been stressful, it hasn't been fun, and I don't like to hear anything about the details. If I could, imagine listening to the radio and you hear your name.
Mr. Jenkins, I do sympathize with you as far as I think everybody involved in this case has.
Just to answer your question, I don't watch anything about this trial.
I got you. You don't watch anything about this trial.
I don't watch anything about this trial.
And that's
Purposely.
And that's based on your experience coming into court and testifying and all the whole rigmarole with that.
It's just to protect me.
Yeah. But again, it's since having to testify in Mr. Boyd's first trial, correct? That's whenever this is all heated up.
Say that again.
Since testifying the first time in Mr. Boyd's federal trial, that's when things started getting heated up. And
No, it was heated from day one. I mean,
so are you telling this jury that you didn't watch any more media coverage at all after you were in the break room that day and you saw the 4Runner?
sir, I don't know if I can make this as clear as I can. This is their job. I didn't ask for this. I don't want to see any part of it. I don't want to hear the details. Have I heard details from coworkers or people who swear they know everything about the trial? You know, there's always a coworker who comes up to you when they find out that you're in the trial and they want to say, yeah, I heard that this, that, and the other. I've got coworkers who will share stuff on social media and whatnot, and I've actually unfriended them. And they're like, why you unfriend me? Because I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to hear about it. I'm trying to forget it and move past.
Mr. Jenkins, my question was, since you saw
No,
that
sir.
initial...
And I've answered you twice. No, sir.
Well, I don't think you have. I understand that you don't want to watch the coverage or anything, but my question was, since seeing that initial report with the 4Runner, are you saying that you haven't seen any media coverage? Back in 2007, you haven't watched any
No,
media coverage?
Sir.
All right. So you're not aware of whether or not that white car with the red pinstripe was put out over the media along with Mr. Boyd's face?
No, sir.
Okay. You weren't exposed to any of that media footage?
No, sir.
And that wouldn't have any influence at all on your testimony today?
No, sir.
How close did this car, the 4Runner, get to you?
I would say I was probably sitting here and probably roughly the wall line here.
Somewhere, I guess that's about, what, 30 feet or so?
Probably.
Okay.
Maybe give or take add about 10 feet to it.
And that encounter took, what, about 20 seconds or so?
Yeah. Give or take, yeah.
And because you were sitting there and parked over in the dark section across from the waste connections, that caused you to call your dad?
Actually, it was dark behind me, but I was parked in more of a lighted area. I mean, common sense will tell you if you're the only one there, to avoid the dark behind you, you're going to park in more of the lighter areas. So I parked closer toward the street edge
Gotcha.
where it's more lighted.
Gotcha. And Mr. Jenkins, I think you've already said that you don't want to have anything to do with this whole situation, but we did send our investigator out there to come talk to you, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Cohan,
I
several
suppose
months
so.
ago,
Mhm.
and at that point in time, you refused to talk with my investigator, correct?
Yeah, and actually, he broke the law by coming on my property that had no trespassing. But I ignored that and let him introduce himself anyway.
So he was courteous to you, was he not?
Well, no.
He wasn't?
I mean, clearly, if I've got no trespassing sitting there on the tree, everyone else knows, hey, don't go past the tree line. He came on and got on my porch. Now, when he came on to my porch, my daughter answered the door. So, no, I was pretty taken aback by that. How did you get my address? Why are you here?
And again, he simply introduced himself to you,
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah,
And
he
then you
wasn't
told him you
rude.
didn't, and you told him you didn't want to talk to him.
Correct.
And at that point in time, he left, correct?
Correct.
He didn't harass you.
No.
He didn't give you a hard time.
No.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins.
Yes, sir.
Just briefly, and to be clear, sir, the previous times you have testified in federal court,
Correct.
and there's a transcript of that testimony.
Yes.
You testified in Mr. Cobben's trial.
I've testified in probably every one of them, yes.
You've testified in all the state trials and
Yes.
the retrials,
Yes.
and there are transcripts as
Yes.
to what you said.
Yes.
That's all.
Just brief.
The only thing, in most of the trials where you were cross-examined, there weren't a whole lot of, those attorneys, when they were asking you questions related to their clients, correct?
That is
Primarily.
Yeah, that is correct. And actually, in one particular case, I remember Takesha, she actually told me she's not interested in talking about that particular, because it was dealing with someone else's trial. And I started to talk about the white vehicle, and she said, no, we're not interested in that right now.
And again, they weren't asking you a whole bunch of questions about the white car. It's all having to do with the Forerunner, right?
For the most
Primarily.
part.
Yeah. All right.
As opposed to my general story. Yeah.
You step down. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And Your Honor, seek free to leave.
When you do, you can release. You can go.
Thanks, sir.
Ms. Mathis?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yeah.
Please have a seat.
Let's get up a little bit closer. Give us your name, please.
Adrienne Mathis.
And it's fair to say you're only here today because you have been personally served with the subpoena.
Yes,
You have no desire to be here.
correct.
Mr. Boyd, are you related to Mr. Boyd?
Yes,
How are you related to Mr. Boyd?
he's my cousin.
Directing your attention back to January 2007, did you have a vehicle?
I believe so.
What kind of vehicle was it?
White Sunbird.
Directing your attention to Exhibit 31. Do you recognize Exhibit 31?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 31?
Looks like my car, but I'm kind of not for sure.
All right. I'm going to go Exhibit 29. You recognize Exhibit 29?
Yes.
And what is Exhibit 29?
Looks like the tail of my car.
And let's see. Now, your white vehicle had, where were you living at the time?
Townview Towers.
Now, did something happen maybe towards the end of the year concerning gas?
No, the car was always messed up.
Gotcha. And as a result of that, did you have to get have some gas popped to you or something?
No, I had gas cans in the back,
Okay. And where would the gas can be?
probably in the trunk.
In the trunk. I understand this is difficult. Did you have occasion to loan your car to somebody the first weekend of January 2007?
I couldn't tell you.
Okay. Do you recall testifying in previous trials?
Not at all.
Do you recall testifying specifically in George Thomas's trial? Looks like December 1st, 2009. It started on December 1st, 2009. And do you recall testifying in that trial?
No, not really.
Okay, if I can approach you, let me show you this transcript. Do you recognize Adrienne Mathis as being your name?
Yes.
Do you recall coming to court and testifying in previous occasions?
I've been to court a lot.
And prior to testifying, do you recall being sworn in?
Yes.
Are you from Detroit?
Yes.
Do you recall in George Thomas being asked the question, now, did you have a cousin or do you still have a cousin by the name of Eric Boyd?
Yes.
And you answering yes.
Yes.
Do you recall being asked the question, did you have a conversation with him the first weekend of January 2007?
I don't recall it right now.
Do you recall giving the answer? I believe so.
Probably so.
Do you recall being asked this question, as a result of the conversation, what did you then do? And given the answer, let him borrow my car.
I guess so, if y'all got it in there.
But you don't recall that?
I do not remember that.
Let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Page 358 on Thomas's. Let me ask you this. Do you recall testifying in the ladies' trial, Vanessa Copeland's trial in 2010?
I do not.
You do not? See, do you recall being asked, looks like we started the trial May 3rd, 2010. Again, and your name is Adrienne Mathis?
Yes.
Is that correct? And you're from Detroit again?
Yes.
Do you recall being asked the question, the first weekend of January 2007, did you loan that white Sunbird to somebody?
Honestly, I couldn't really tell you. I loaned my car out to everybody.
Sure. Do you recall giving the answer yes?
If it's in there, I probably did.
And do you recall being asked the question, and who was that?
Not really.
And do you recall giving that answer? And what is that answer?
It says my cousin,
Your cousin who?
Eric Boyd.
Your Honor, and again, I think just out of an abundance of caution, I think we're going to try to proceed under Rule 613-26, and I think that in order to try to go that route, we're going to need a jury out hearing.
Yes, the state group. Yes,
All right.
the state.
So, ladies and gentlemen, a matter's been brought up that I have to take up outside your presence. So please go with your court officer, and you can leave your notebooks. We will bring you back as soon as possible. Oh, and don't discuss the case, please. You can be seated. All right, Mr. Granger, do you want to object?
Yeah, I think I need to technically object. Again, I think there is a hearsay rule that the state could get in. It's asking the state if she was trying to refresh the witness's recollection. Clearly, that wasn't happening. And at that point in time, I guess you can also impeach with prior inconsistent statements as an impeachment tool, but I don't think we were quite doing what the rule would contemplate for that. So I was trying to make sure that we follow the procedures that we need to, even for impeachment, or as Rule 803-26, which would be them coming in. So I'm just trying to make sure that we follow the procedures that we're supposed to follow for the admission of these type of statements.
Okay.
And the state did give me a forewarning that this may be what we're going to be dealing with.
I anticipate this.
I can tell.
What were you gonna say? No, 613.
General, you want to state your position?
Please, Your Honor, the state, we're going to seek to introduce the transcripts of her testimony on this issue and a second issue that I'm going to ask her about under 803-26. And 803-26 provides a prior inconsistent statement of a testifying witness. A statement otherwise admissible under Rule 613B if all of the following conditions are satisfied. A, the declarant must testify at the trial or hearing and be subject to cross-examination concerning the statement. B, the statement must be an audio or video recorded statement, a written statement signed by the witness, or a statement given under oath. I believe that's what we have here, 6 prior transcripts. And C, the judge must conduct a hearing outside the presence of the jury to determine by a preponderance of the evidence that the prior statement was made under circumstances indicating trustworthiness. And I think that by her testifying that she does not recall, loaning the car to anybody or who she loaned the car to, we believe that that is establishes it's a prior inconsistent statement. It's a prior inconsistent statement.
The court would agree with that, although I'm reluctant to. The weight of authority is against me, you're correct. The testimony that she doesn't remember what she said is inconsistent with her prior testimony. Before I rule, I'm supposed to give Mr. Frazier an opportunity to voir dire or examine the witness.
Ms. Mathis, these previous times that you've testified, were you testifying truthfully, or were you simply repeating a statement that somebody had wanted you to say or come into court and testify to?
I was just repeating what I seen.
Huh?
Just repeating what I seen on paper.
Repeating what you'd seen on paper?
Yes.
Okay. Where had you seen it on paper?
I guess previous statements from the rest of the trials, I believe so.
Okay. Those circumstances where you were shown paper, was that where you were simply, in preparation to call you as a witness, you were shown previous statements and just said, refer to this, or look, reference this, review this?
Yeah, I guess prior to my testimony.
Okay. Were you being truthful in those previous trials?
To tell you the truth, I can't remember anything from when that happened, to be honest with you.
So you don't know whether you were being truthful or not?
Probably not if I'm reading it off the paper.
Reading it off the paper. Were you being truthful at the federal grand jury?
If it was already on the paper, I just memorized it and went with it.
Are you talking about your copy of your notes from where the detectives came out and interviewed you? Were you given a transcript of an interview from when a detective came and talked to you?
Well, they pretty much prepped me before.
When you say they prepped you, are you talking about the AUSA?
I have no clue who it was.
Which trial are we talking about?
Eric Boyd's.
Okay. We're talking about the first in time, the trial back in 2007. So that would have been the federal trial?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying that you were being prepped to testify falsely? Is that what you're saying?
I'm not for sure. I just pretty much went with it.
You went along with what they were saying?
Yes.
So your testimony from the federal trial, that is not truthful?
Probably not.
Okay.
Ms. Jones, you have a question?
Please, just so the judge knows, it's fair to say, do you recall talking to before you testified in the grand jury or court, do you recall talking to law enforcement? Do you recall talking to Investigator Childress?
Well, I talked to somebody before him too, though.
Okay, you recall talking to somebody before Investigator Childress, but you recall talking to Investigator Childress?
I believe so.
And you recall giving him consent to search your car? That piece of paper? That piece of paper you looked at?
Yeah, that piece of paper, I'm not for sure because they said it was searched in Town View, but the car was never in Town View.
Right, no, the location where he came to you in Town View.
Yeah, but the car was never in Town View.
Right. But what I'm saying is that, do you recall talking to Investigator Childress on this date here? Looks like January 16th, 2007?
Not really.
Okay, is that your signature?
That's my signature.
Okay. Now, do you recall testifying, I guess talking to federal officers, and you recall testifying in the grand jury?
Vaguely.
Okay. And then you recall testifying at Mr. Boyd's federal trial?
Vaguely.
And you recall when you testified at Mr. Boyd's federal trial, explaining to the court then that you had received pressure from the family to change your story?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did you, the other thing I wanted to ask you about, do you recall, where did you have to go to? Did Mr. Boyd contact you on a Sunday and tell you that the car was broke down in front of his mom's house?
Not that I can remember.
Do you recall going to Ridgebrook getting the car?
No, I never picked the car back up.
Right, do you recall going to Ridgebrook and seeing the car?
Yes.
Okay. When you got to Ridgebrook, where was the car at in Ridgebrook?
Parked in front of my aunt's house.
And who's your aunt?
Nancy Boyd.
And does she have a son?
Yes.
Who was her son?
Eric Boyd.
And so the car was parked in front of his, does he live there?
At the time, I'm not sure. I don't know.
And so when you went to Ridgebrook where the car was, did you look in the car for a CD?
Can't really recall.
Do you recall looking in the car?
Tell you the truth, not for sure.
Do you recall whether or not you found anything in the car?
Not for sure.
Okay. And so this is the second thing I wanted to ask you about, and that's going to be, you recall previously testifying, all of the previous hearings, trials, to finding a sandwich bag of bullets.
Don't recall, may have.
Okay. A clear sandwich bag of bullets. You just don't recall saying that?
Yeah.
You don't recall testifying to that?
Right.
You're not saying that that's not true, it's just you don't recall sitting here today?
Well, I just don't remember it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So-
As you sit here today, you don't recall whether or not you did that or not.
Right.
As you sit here today, you don't recall whether or not you loaned your car to Mr. Boyd or not,
Right. It could have been anybody.
including Mr. Boyd.
Right.
You just don't recall as you sit here.
Right.
And so you do, of course, recall testifying. Before you testified in federal court, you were under oath,
Right.
and you swore to tell the truth.
Yeah.
Looks like when you testified here in state court, I've got Vanessa Coleman, I think you testified twice in her case. Before you testified, you recall being sworn in.
I could have.
And of course, you would have told the truth.
Say so. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like Mr. Thomas, you testified twice in his case, and before you testified, of course, you would have been sworn in
This every time, I think.
every time, and you would have told the truth.
I guess.
In Mr. Coffin's case, that was a little different because do you recall that the defense attorney actually called you as a witness?
I don't recall.
You don't recall who you are. But before you testified in Mr. Coffin's case, you recall you were sworn in
I guess so.
and swore to tell the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those transcripts provide that you, and I understand that as you sit here today, you don't recall, but in all of those transcripts, you testified under oath that you loaned your car to Mr. Boyd the first weekend or first week of January 2007. As you sit here today, you don't recall whether or not you did that or not.
Right.
And if all of these transcripts show that when you got he called you to tell you that the car wasn't working. You go and get the car on Monday and you find a bag of itty bitty bullets. As you sit here today, you just don't recall that.
Correct.
But if the transcripts say it, that's what you testified to.
I guess so.
All right. Under these circumstances, you can ask her about prior consistent statements. I know you have done some questioning about it. The tenor of her responses has been she's not denying that she made those statements. She's simply saying she can't remember. Since she's not denying, extrinsic evidence is not admissible. If the extrinsic evidence can only come in to be evidence if she flat out denies making the statement. When she simply says she doesn't remember, and in her case, she repeatedly said, well, if it's in there, I must have said it.
Okay.
Under those circumstances, I cannot admit the transcripts as extrinsic evidence.
Even under 803.26?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Yes.
But again, you can ask her about, did you make this statement?
Okay.
I think you've done that. Under these circumstances, if you want to reinforce what you've done, and then allow Mr. Brady to cross-examine, I'll allow you to do that.
Yes.
Anything further we need to take up at this time?
No, sir.
All right. Mr. Brady, carry back in. You can be seated. Stay away the call.
Stay away, Your Honor.
Next way to call.
Yes, Your Honor.
You can proceed now.
I'm gonna bring them up here. If you don't mind, let's just go through them. Before I do, as you sit here today, do you recall whether or not you loaned your white car to Mr. Boyd the first weekend of January 2007?
No, I do not recall.
You have to say into the
I
microphone.
do not recall.
Okay. Now, do you recall whether or not you got a phone call from Mr. Boyd? Do you recall getting a phone call from Mr. Boyd on Sunday concerning your white Pontiac?
No, I do not recall.
Do you recall at some point in time going to get your car?
No. I do not recall.
Right. Did you go to Ridgebrook to get your car?
Not to go get my car.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Did you have an occasion to go to Ridgebrook to see your car?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us about that?
I can't remember.
Okay. In Ridgebrook, who lives in Ridgebrook?
My aunt,
And what is your aunt's name?
Nancy Boyd.
And Nancy Boyd, does Nancy Boyd have a son?
Yes.
And who is her son?
Eric Boyd.
Is Eric Boyd your cousin?
Yes.
Is Eric Boyd seated at the defense table?
Yes.
Today, what does Mr. Boyd have on?
A suit.
Okay. The record reflect the witness identified the defendant.
Record will so reflect.
Did you know whether or not Mr. Boyd lived in Ridgebrook with his mom, Nancy?
I can't recall.
Okay. And so whenever you went to Ridgebrook to see your car, did you look for anything in your car?
I can't recall.
Sure. Okay. And so I want to talk about those two things: whether or not you loaned your car to somebody, and whether or not you looked in your car for anything. It's okay. So of course you recall testifying previously at previous proceedings.
Yes.
And so first I want to start with the federal transcript, and I'm going to start on page 90. I can't tell you the volume. I just printed it out.
Are we going to use them as extrinsic evidence, or are you just going to ask her if she recalls testifying?
Yeah, I was going to show her the line. I'm not seeking to introduce them, but I was going to show her the line.
I was thinking that you could ask her whether she made the statement or whether she could recall.
Come on, Counsel.
Yes.
In a previous court setting, question being asked to you and drawing your attention back to the weekend of January 6th through January 8th, 2007, were you in your car and did you have control of your car or did somebody else borrow it? And you recall giving an answer on what date?
I could have, but just don't remember.
Okay. Do you recall being asked, you're going to have to tell me, I'm just trying to draw your attention back to the general weekend, which is the weekend roughly of January 6th through January 8th. January 6th would be a Friday. And do you recall giving the answer, yes, somebody borrowed it?
I don't recall.
You don't recall that? Okay. Do you recall being asked the question, okay, who borrowed your car? You do not recall that question?
No.
Do you recall giving the answer, Eric Boyd?
No.
No? And do you recall being asked the question, your cousin, and you saying yes?
No.
Do you recall being asked the question, the defendant in the courtroom,
No.
and you giving the answer, yes? Okay. And do you recall being asked the question, do you remember what day he borrowed the car, and your answer being either Thursday or Friday?
No. Can't recall.
Can't recall, okay. Now, do you recall, I'm on page 100, I don't know. Do you recall being asked the question in a previous court proceeding, okay, and did you go inside to try and get the keys, or what did you do?
I have no clue.
No?
No.
Okay. Do you recall giving the answer, I went inside to get the keys?
I don't recall.
Now, so whenever you told us before that you went to Ridgebrook and you saw your car, did you have the keys with you, or did you have to go get the keys?
I really don't remember.
Okay, that's fair. Do you recall being asked the question, did you see Eric Boyd?
I don't remember, but if it's in there, I guess.
Okay, and you saying yes. And so you're not denying this, you're just saying as you sit here today, you don't recall what happened January 2007.
Correct.
Do you recall being asked the question, did he say anything to you, and your answer being yes, he said my car was broke down?
But it was always broke down, so if it's in there.
Okay. And do you recall you being asked what did you do, and you saying I went out there and tried to start my car up?
I don't remember.
Yeah, okay. Jump ahead. Did you have to ride the bus over to Ridgebrook?
I really can't recall.
You can't recall? That's fair. Let's see here. Let me jump over. And do you recall being asked, so you were trying to get your belongings out, meaning your car, and you saying yes? And you being asked, and did you find some of your CDs? You saying yes. And then the question being, do you recall being asked this, did you find anything else in the car? And do you recall answering yes, a sandwich bag of bullets? Do you recall giving that answer?
No.
Question being a clear sandwich bag, and you saying yes,
I don't recall.
of bullets? And do you recall giving a description of the bullets?
No.
Saying about like your finger, the length of your pinky finger?
I can't recall.
Can't recall that? Okay. You're not saying it didn't happen, you're just saying you don't recall.
I just don't remember anything.
Okay.
Even after it happened, probably.
Right. All right, let's go to a court proceeding in 2010. Do you recall being sworn in and being asked the question in May 2010 that the first weekend in January 2007, did you loan that white Sunbird to somebody? Do you recall being asked that question in 2010?
I don't recall.
You recall being given the answer yes.
I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked the question, and who was that?
I don't recall.
Don't recall. And you recall giving the answer, my cousin Eric Boyd.
I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked the question, okay, did you look in the car? Did you find anything in the car?
I don't recall.
And do you recall giving the answer, yes, some bullets?
I don't recall.
Okay. And do you recall being asked, can you describe those bullets? And you giving the answer, they were small bullets.
I don't recall.
Okay. And do you recall being asked the question, and were they loose bullets or were they in something? And you giving the answer, they was in a sandwich bag.
I don't recall.
Recall it? Okay. Do you recall a court proceeding in 2009? Being asked a question as a result of the conversation, what did you do then? And, well, let me back up. You, let me back up. You recall being asked, now, did you have a cousin or do you still have a cousin by the name of Eric Boyd? You saying yes, which you recall that is true.
I was about to say it could have.
Do you recall being asked the question, did you have a conversation with him the first weekend of January 2007? And you give him the answer, I believe so.
I don't recall.
Don't recall. And you recall being asked the question, as a result of the conversation, what did you then do? And you give him the answer, let him borrow my car.
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall being asked the question, tell us what, if anything, you found in the car, and you give him the answer, small bullets on the passenger side seat?
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, do you know approximately how many bullets you found, and given the answer, no, it was in a sandwich bag?
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, a sandwich bag, and you give him the answer, yes, probably I'd say more than 10.
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall testifying at another proceeding in 2009? Again, concerning the car. And who was it you loaned it to? And you give him the answer, my cousin Eric.
I don't recall.
You don't recall that? And do you recall being asked the question, and did he have it the entirety of that weekend? And you give him the answer, I believe so.
I don't recall.
You don't recall? Okay. And do you recall being asked the question, do you recall finding anything inside of your car when you got back into it after that weekend? And you give him the answer, yeah, a sandwich bag full of bullets.
I don't recall.
It's not that it didn't happen, you just don't recall it as you sit here today.
Don't remember any of it.
Yes. It's almost finished. 2012, in a court proceeding, you recall being asked, do you know Eric Boyd? And you give him the answer, yes. You recall testifying to that?
I really don't recall.
Sure. And being asked, who is Eric Boyd? You saying my cousin. You recall down here being asked the question, and did you have anything, did you keep any, oh, I'm sorry. You recall being asked back in January of 2007, did you ever loan your vehicle to anybody? You answering yes. Do you recall that?
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, who did you loan it to? And your answer being, my cousin Eric Boyd.
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, okay, did you notice anything inside of the vehicle? Your answer being yeah.
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, what did you notice inside of the vehicle? Your answer being bullets.
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, and what kind of bullets? And your answer being small bullets.
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, and where were the bullets at? And your answer being on the passenger side floorboard.
I don't recall.
And do you recall being asked the question, and what, were they loose or were they in anything? And you giving the answer, they was in a sandwich bag.
I don't recall.
Okay. Here's the last one. Do you recall testifying in 2013? And being asked about Mr. Boyd. Do you recall being asked the question, and did you have occasion to loan him your vehicle the first weekend of January 2007? And your answer being yes.
I don't recall.
Do you recall, after you being asked the question, okay, after you loaned it to him, do you recall being in the vehicle? You give him the answer, yeah.
I don't recall.
And being asked the question, after you loaned it to him, yeah. And being asked the question, I guess, tell us about that. And you give him the answer, he called me and told me my car was broke down. I went over to Ridgebrook where my aunt lived, and that's Miss Boyd's wife, Nancy.
Yeah.
And to see what was wrong with it, and he was like, it was overheating and everything. Is that what would happen to your car?
Well, it was cut off.
Okay. And I looked in the car to get some of my stuff out of there, and then I found a sandwich bag of bullets. And you recall giving that answer?
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, and can you describe the bullets? And you give the answer, they were small.
I don't recall.
You recall being asked the question, okay, when you say small, about how small? and you indicating about pinky size. You don't recall that? And just for the record, can you hold up your little pinky so we can see? And for the record, you're indicating your pinky. And do you recall being asked this question now in Exhibit 14? Can you tell us where you found that sandwich bag of bullets and you giving the answer on the passenger side underneath the seat?
I don't recall.
And it's not that that didn't happen. You're just saying, as you sit here today, you don't recall. I could show you Exhibit 424. Do you recognize, you of course recall Investigator Todd Childers?
Yes.
With the Knoxville Police Department?
Yes.
Do you recall talking to him?
No, not really.
No? Okay. Do you recognize your signature here? And can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what this is? You probably don't recall signing this, I guess.
Correct.
Have you had a chance to read over it?
No.
No? Okay. Do you recognize this as being a Knoxville Police Department voluntary consent to search vehicle?
Yes.
Now, at the time, back in January 2007, you were living at 1100 Townview Towers?
On and off, yes.
Did you probably talk with Investigator Childress in the parking lot or in your apartment?
I have no clue.
No clue. Okay. And again, your name is Adrienne Mathis?
Yes.
Is your date of birth 11/1982?
Yes.
And your vehicle, I think we got the tag number up there. I can't see that well, but is your tag number, can you look up there and see, is your tag number 320CYS?
Yeah, sitting right here.
Sitting right there, sitting right there. So is that the same tag number?
I have no clue.
No, the same tag number?
Oh, yes.
The 320?
On the picture, yes.
Okay. All right, and that's your name?
Yes.
And that is your signature there?
Yes.
And you are the registered owner of that vehicle?
Yes.
We'd like to move Exhibit 424 in as evidence. 424. The consent.
I don't know if the foundation is there to admit it. She says that she doesn't.
Well, I guess we would say she's identified her signature.
She's also saying that she doesn't recall doing it.
Let me see.
My car wasn't never searched in Townview.
Right.
Yeah.
She's identified her, yes, she's identified her signature. I can make this.
Technically, we do object at this time.
What will this put over rule the objection?
I can make this Exhibit 424. And just so we're clear, I am just about finished. You don't recall the incident happening in January 2007.
Correct.
What you recall is, for whatever reason, you went to Ridgebrook and you saw your car there.
Correct.
You don't know how it got there.
I can't really remember.
That's fair. And when we went through the previous testimony, you're just saying you don't recall testifying.
Correct.
You don't recall what you said.
Correct.
Not that it didn't happen, it's just you don't recall.
Correct.
That's what's.
Any other questions, this witness, Mr. Ray?
Briefly.
Very well.
Ms. Mathis, I'm sure you won't recall this either, but you testified at a proceeding on January 18th, 2007 before the federal grand jury. Do you recall that?
I do not.
If I can approach the witness. Do you recall in being asked questions about loaning your car to your cousin, Mr. Boyd, being asked the question, did he borrow it on a Sunday the 7th? And do you recall your answer being, it's a possibility it was Sunday the 7th? Because the next day he was telling me, the same day he was telling me something was wrong with my car. Do you recall that statement?
I don't recall.
Do you recall being asked the question, and the complete question is, okay, what would be accurate in terms of time or day, and when, do you need a reference to the page, General Fitzgerald?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, what would be accurate in terms of what time of day, and then think about the day? Answer, it was probably around, it was the afternoon when he borrowed my car. Do you remember making that statement?
I don't recall.
You don't recall. And do you recall being asked the question, do you recall the question about in reference to when he borrowed the car, your answer being, because I went to see my aunt on Sunday and asked her if she was going to church, and he asked me if he could go pick up a friend in my car. Do you recall giving that answer?
Don't recall.
And do you recall being asked the question, was it the same day? And your answer, I'm sorry, the question was he borrowed the car and then returned it on the same day, and your answer to that question was yes. Do you recall that statement?
I do not recall.
You don't recall. Ms. Mathis, prior to you coming into court here today, my investigator has been trying to get in touch with you. Is that correct?
Probably so.
And you have not responded to his inquiries or his attempts to contact you in regards to court today?
Responded to nobody.
You've responded to nobody. I think that's clear. Thank you, Ms. Mathis.
And just so it is clear, we tried to contact you. You would not respond back to us either.
Correct.
Right? Again, it is, you do not want to be here.
Correct.
Has anyone in your family contacted you?
No.
Now, do you recall for the proceedings in another court, do you recall being contacted by family members?
I don't recall.
If I can, 109. Almost finished. Let's talk about the first trial. After the grand jury proceedings, and you had to testify in federal court. And they were asking you about do you remember being asked about your grand jury testimony in federal court?
No.
And being asked the question, okay, why would you have told the police officer that, Ms. Mathis? And given the answer, I don't know, I was feeling pressured. You recall giving that answer?
No.
You recall being asked the question, why were you feeling pressured? And given the answer, because my family kept telling me I didn't remember what day that he borrowed the car. You recall giving that answer?
That sounds about right, but I don't recall that answer.
Yes, ma'am. You recall being asked the question, who in your family were telling you this? And given the answer, my aunt and my brother.
I don't recall.
Now, your aunt, is that Miss Boyd? Is that Mr. Boyd's mom?
Yes.
And your brother, is that Kevin Armstrong?
Yes.
Well, should have just read the next question. Do you recall, and could you name those people, please, and give them the answer, Nancy Boyd and Kevin Armstrong? You recall being asked the question, and now what were they telling you? And given the answer that I didn't remember what day I let him borrow the car.
I don't recall.
And as you sit here today, you don't recall what day you let him, you don't recall who borrowed the car.
Correct.
That's all.
Mr. Frazier, you can step down. Thank you. Any objection to her being released?
No,
You're free to go.
thank you. For the record, we would like to move into evidence exhibit 31 and 29.
Any objection?
I talked to him, I showed them to her. I don't know that I moved them in, but I will seek to move them in now. They're going to come in later on with the police officer.
Police officer, since she said she wasn't sure that was her car, it looked like her.
All right. What was the first one? I mean, which exhibit you want in?
Your Honor, the first exhibit, I would agree 39, she was unsure that was her car, but 29, my memory is that she was able to identify 29.
I thought she just couldn't be sure of the license plate number. Yes. Again, I have to ask Mr. Gray to do the check for us.
I think technically right now, Your Honor.
Okay.
I think technically I do, Your Honor, yeah.
Did I hear you say you had another witness?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll sustain the objection.
Yes. Yes. Here, quick and approach. Sure.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat.
Give the jury your name, please, sir. My name is Jerome Arnold.
Live here in Knoxville, Mr. Arnold?
I used to. I no longer live here. I live in the Chattanooga area now, but in 2007, I was living in Knoxville.
That's my next question. Where did you live in 2007?
I was living at 2124 Chipman Street in northeast Knoxville.
It's specifically January 2007 where you living there?
I was living there in January 2000.
And if you don't care to look to this map to your right, see if you can spot on this map where your house was.
Yes.
And it may actually have a call out there for that address.
Oh, and actually, yeah, that's it right there.
Okay, and it's got a call out, said 2124 Chipman Street.
Yes.
It's kind of a black box.
Second house from the corner.
From Bora Street.
Yes.
Is that right? You can return it. Now, in the late evening hours of January 6th on into January 7th, or January 7th, Saturday night, during that first weekend in January, were you home?
I was.
In the early morning hours, were you awake?
I was awake. I was watching television.
You have to recall what you were watching.
Yes, I was watching a program called The Outer Limits.
And you recall while watching that program hearing something.
I did. I heard 3 pops in the distance off to my, I was sitting in a chair with my back to the window on Chipman. And I heard a sound, 3 pops to my left. And when it happened, I was watching a late night television program. I looked at my watch, and it was 1:45. At first I thought, well, it was a week after New Year's. Maybe somebody's shooting off some leftover firecrackers or something, but it stopped with those 3 pops.
And do you remember the approximate sequence, the timing between each of those pops?
It was fairly short. It was like pop, pop, pop.
Was any delay to any extent between the shots?
None that I could tell.
And just so we're clear, I believe you told us you were watching TV, your back was to Chipman Street.
It was.
And the sound came from your left and to the rear.
Yes.
And if you don't care to, one more time, step down and look at this map.
Okay.
And
I was sitting in the house with my back to the street. The sound came from this direction off up toward this wasteland there. It used to be a lumber company.
you don't care, I'll pick the blue marker, if you could just maybe draw a line that approximate the distance or the area from where that sound came. You say you didn't think too much of it at the time?
No, not at the time.
And then, of course, later on, contacted by law enforcement and gave an interview about what you had heard at that hour.
Yes,
And have testified in several other trials involving this matter.
I have.
Absolutely.
Cross-examination.
How are you doing, sir?
I'm fine, thank you.
I know you've testified in several different proceedings and been asked some various questions. From where you are, where your house is situated, I mean, you're aware of 2316 Chipman Street where the murders took place.
I am.
Okay. And from where your house is, you have a fairly good view of that location, do you not?
Yes.
Okay. And I don't think the distance, even though they're sitting apart a little ways, they're not too far from each other. Would you agree?
They were almost exactly 1 block apart because there's no 2200 block on Chipman Street. It goes from the 2100 block, no 2200, it goes directly to 2300.
Okay. And I know that there have been previous times where there may have been people arguing or fighting or fussing in the street, and that you would be, in those circumstances, if they were in the road, you have heard that, correct?
I would have heard something like that.
Yeah. And on the night, other than the 3 pops, you didn't hear any noises, any screaming or anything like that?
I did not.
And I'm not going to ask you any questions about insulation of the various houses involved. And I believe you said the direction the sounds came from, and I don't think you testified to it today with General Morton, but previous testimony, it came from the southeast over towards the train tracks. I think you've testified to that multiple times.
Northeast.
Correct? Northeast, that's what I said. The northeast, towards the trail.
Toward the train tracks.
Okay. And this was at 1:45, and you said that you were watching the outer.
I was watching television and I heard the pops, and I was already knew that it was late, so I looked at my watch when I heard the pops, and it was 1:45.
Now, thank you, Mr. Arnold.
Anything else in this witness? No. You can step down and answer. Is this witness free to leave?
Please.
Mr. Frazier, you would like to be released? No. You're free to leave, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you.
Up here, sir.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Please have a seat, sir.
Give the jury your name, please, sir.
Roy Thurman.
Thurman, how old are you, please?
I'm 61.
And you do not live in Knox County anymore, is that correct?
That's correct.
Back in 2007, January 2007, where did you live?
I lived in Rockwood, but I worked in Knoxville.
Where did you work in Knoxville?
At R&T Coating.
Where is that located?
I forget, I think it's Boone Street, if I'm not mistaken.
And tell us the type of work you did.
I was a sandblaster.
And what all was involved in sandblasting.
I've sandblasted all different kinds of stuff to be powder coated.
Now, in January of 2007, did there come a time where you went to work early one morning and saw something?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall what day it was?
It was on a Sunday.
And what time did you get to work that day?
I arrived about 7:45 a.m.
And when you arrived, how long was it before you noticed something?
Approximately about 5-10 minutes.
So you just had gotten to work?
Yes, sir.
Now, I'll ask you if what you saw was some smoke.
Yes, sir.
And where was it coming from?
From off of the railroad tracks behind my sandblasting room.
And about how close is your sandblasting area to the railroad track?
Probably about 25 to 15 feet, somewhere around in there.
And was it a lot of smoke, a little bit of smoke, or do you recall?
There wasn't a whole lot of smoke.
I want to show you some pictures, see if you recognize these pictures. There are three of them. They're going to be exhibits 16, 17, and 18. Do you recognize each of these pictures?
Yes.
Okay, look, and I'm going to put them right there on that screen and also up on the wall. Maybe. And is that exhibit 16 that you've identified just a minute ago?
Yes, that's my sandblasting area.
Is that where you were working?
Yes.
Is that looking out toward the railroad track?
That's looking toward the side the railroad tracks are in behind the,
And just so we're clear, in January, the foliage would not be on these trees. Is that right? That's shown in these pictures?
right,
So these pictures were taken sometime later when the leaves were out?
yes.
And exhibit 17, what does that show?
Where the railroad tracks are in behind the trees.
Is that from the vantage point where you would have been to see the smoke that you've told us about?
Yes,
Looking out from your
Yes.
area?
yes, sir.
And lastly, exhibit 18, what are we looking at there?
And that's where we powder coated.
Yeah, is that the open area where you were working?
Yes.
Looking,
I was working right in this area where the green is.
if you know, where was this picture taken from? When it was taken, where was the person taking the picture? Where were they standing approximately?
Back on this side of the fence, and there was an empty lot and then another building. And they were standing in between the buildings between that building and our building on that empty lot to take the picture.
Is that near the railroad track
Yes,
from where this picture was taken?
yes.
We've moved 16, 17, and 18 in.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Let them be received. As with cross-examination?
Now, I think the General already asked you about the time of the year. The leaves weren't on the trees, so you had a pretty good view of where the smoke was coming up, correct?
Yes.
Now, is it unusual to see smoke coming from over in that area near the railroad tracks?
Not too often. You never hardly seen any. Just every once in a while you'd see.
Do people use that through the railroad track sometimes as a cut through as they're going to and from Cherry Street or some of the other places?
Well, a lot of the people walked up and down the railroad tracks.
Okay, so there is a fair amount of foot traffic up and down the
Yes.
railroad tracks. Okay. And so it was sort of unusual, but not anything that really stood out. Is that correct?
Right.
No further questions.
Sir, I didn't get your name.
Roy Thurman.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. You said right.
Thank you.
Any objections to this witness being released?
No, Your
No
Honor.
objection. Mr. Thurman, you're free to leave or stay as you will.
Okay, thank you, sir.
J.D. Ford?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the evidence you're about to give in the hearing of this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Absolutely.
Please have a seat, sir.
Please give us your name.
J.D. Ford, F-O-R-D.
Sir, where are you employed?
I'm an employee of Norfolk Southern Corporation
How long have you been employed there?
since 1996.
And what do you do there?
I'm a locomotive engineer.
So if I can direct your attention back to January 2007. Calendar here. And I want to direct your attention to Sunday, January 7th, 2007. You recall whether or not you were working on that day?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
You recall the time you went into work?
It was 8:15, I believe it was that morning.
And was there a particular route you were going to take that day on the train?
Yeah, at that time I had a regular route between Knoxville and Chattanooga.
So what time did you leave Knoxville?
We departed the yard sometime after 12 p.m. afternoon. So, I don't know, 12:10, 12:05, somewhere in the neighborhood.
What time would you have arrived in Chattanooga?
Well, it's about a 4-hour run if you don't have other trains to meet. It's single track with side tracks along the way, and so it's about a 4-hour run, but you know, every time you got to meet a train, it's another 45 minutes or so.
Tell us what happened.
Well, that morning after we left the yard, came across Cherry Street after we got everything out of the yard that we were moving that day, and I noticed, I don't know, probably about as far as I could see, 50 or 75 yards, I guess you'd say, something at first glance I thought was maybe a piece of burnt wood, but it had the appearance of a body. And the closer I got as we were proceeding up toward it, I could definitely tell it was a body. And then as I got right over it, I could see the less burned parts from the thighs down, that it was definitely a body. But, well, in my opinion, at that time, I thought it was a body.
What did you then do?
Well, my conductor was preoccupied. He was talking to the dispatcher. So I sat out in the cab. I said, hey, that looks like a body. You know, and I was kind of going back and forth with just myself over, you know, what I was thinking that, you know, it could have been, as I said. And, so he really wasn't paying attention. So as I got over the top of it, where I could look outside the window, well, with it closed, I could just, you know, see what I could see. I stopped the train, and I told him, you know, I got his attention, his undivided attention, you know, by the emotional outburst I had, you know, like, dude, that's a body. So then I contacted the chief dispatcher and told him, he's the boss of the dispatchers that control our train movements. And he said, well, just stay right there. And I was like, all right. So I wanted to be sure it was a body, you know, that somebody didn't pull some kind of weird practical joke, you know, doing something like that. So I asked the conductor if he wanted to go back there, and, you know, he didn't. He said, no, I'm just going to stay right here. So I decided that I was going to take the voyage back to make sure, you know, it was what I thought it was.
And you did that?
Yes, I did.
What did you see?
I saw a severely burned man that didn't have any clothing on. And,
After observing that, what did y'all do?
I contacted the chief again before after I gathered myself, you know, because it was quite an emotional experience. Not something I'd ever witnessed before. And then I called him, told him, yes, it definitely was. And he told me that just, you know, to go back to the engine, that the authorities would be there in the next few minutes. And so I did. By the time I got back down to I believe that's 9th Avenue. By the time I got back there, there was the police were arriving.
I've got a couple of photographs. Let me first ask you, directing your attention to Exhibit 427. Do you recognize Exhibit 427? This top one here. Do you recognize this aerial shot?
Yeah.
In showing you this aerial shot, are you able to see the train tracks on Exhibit 427?
Yeah, they're right over here.
Now, if I could, can you explain to the jury what is a sign with a W? What does that mean?
Now that's a whistle board. There's two different kinds. Down south, they have a kind that's a Morse code letter Q. It's comes from the English thing, means we're coming through with the Queen's freight. And I guess they just had, you know, more signs whole bunch of signs. Anyway, those Q's ended up down south. You don't see any of those up north. And there's most of them are the letter W, which means whistle. And it's about 2,500 feet before you come to a crossing. Or they figure it out, so, you know, your speed, about 15 seconds before you get there.
Now, showing you on Exhibit 427, do you see where you saw the body? Approximately.
Yeah, it's about, it's behind this warehouse. I'm not using this view exactly, and we're not.
I've got some pictures.
But it's right in this area. Right, it's just past the whistle board for this crossing.
Okay. And so let's look at some pictures, and we'll look for the whistle. Directing your attention to Exhibit 19. Do you recognize, I know you're probably not used to this view either, but do you recognize what's shown here in Exhibit 19?
Yes, ma'am, yeah.
What is shown here in Exhibit 19?
That's a warehouse. And down there about, you can see, at least on this, you can
Okay.
see the whistle board right in here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exhibit 20.
Yeah, it's a little closer picture of the same.
Do you see that the W right there? Probably.
Oh yeah, there it is. Yeah. Yeah, there's a W.
And now that W, keeping your attention on the W, and for the record, I'm getting ready to show you the picture of the body. Exhibit 21, is this what you saw?
Yes, ma'am.
Exhibit 22, do you recognize Exhibit 22?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is Exhibit 22?
Well, that's when they took and put his body in that bag and put him on that device to, load him up on Fred Duffy's truck.
Like move Exhibits 19, 20, 21, and 22 in his evidence?
No objection. Let them do, see.
And so, now looking back, in light of those pictures, looking back, do you see on this aerial map approximately where you saw the body?
Yes, ma'am. So it's going to be over here in this, in this area.
Okay. Can you use that red mark and just put an X on it?
Sure. I'm going to give it a video X. Come on.
That's what's
Cross-examination.
In running freight on the railroad traffic, there's a record of the various railroad cars that are moving, correct, on the tracks? I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm just saying that the companies keep record of which trains are operating on the lines, correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe didn't ask you the question. But yeah, the trains that are on the lines, the companies keep track of what time they depart, what time they arrive, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I know that you previously looked at least your departure and arrival for the train you were on that day, correct?
Not in a while, but yes, I have looked.
Not in a while, but you have previously reviewed it. Again, I'm not trying to trip you up, okay? So, again, you were going down to Chattanooga, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you left the yard here in Knoxville to go down to Chattanooga, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you weren't the only freight train operating on those lines that day?
No, sir.
Okay. No further questions?
Just want to make sure that I'm clear. Approximately what time do you think it was that you stopped the train?
It was around 12:20.
And when you stopped the train, were you blocking Cherry Street?
Yes, ma'am.
That's all.
Anything else? You can step down, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been about 2 hours, so we'll take a brief break, the afternoon break. You can leave your outfits in the chair, just go to the court officer. Please talk about the case. Roughly 10 to 15 minute break, recess.